All right, good morning, everyone. Good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started. Sorry for the slightly late start, but we're on our way. My name is Michael Kugelman. I'm the Senior Associate for South Asia and also the Deputy Director for the Asia Program at the Woodrow Wilson Center. And on behalf of the Woodrow Wilson Center, I'd like to welcome you all and thank you for being here today. A very brief word about the Wilson Center. We are chartered by Congress as the official memorial to President Woodrow Wilson. We serve as the nation's key nonpartisan policy forum for tackling global issues through independent research and open dialogue in order to inform actionable ideas for the policy community. Our aim is to build a bridge between the worlds of academia and policy, to inform and develop solutions to America's foreign policy challenges, and all of this is done in the spirit of Woodrow Wilson, the only U.S. president to have held a PhD. Now, if you've ever been in a very rollicking social gathering and in a position where you're struggling to identify some type of clever factoid to regale everyone, that's it, that Woodrow Wilson PhD tidbit. So you're very welcome for that. Our core objective over the next few days is to have a series of forward-thinking discussions about Pakistan on a broad array of issues. We have enlisted nearly 30 people, officials, scholars, analysts, journalists, members of the business community, among others, to lead us in this pursuit that we are describing as the Pakistan Policy Symposium. So why have this conference? I think the better question perhaps is why not have this conference? Over the last decade or so, the Wilson Center has consistently applied a wide lens to a country that in this town tends to be viewed through a narrow prism dominated by security. And we've done plenty here at the Wilson Center on security issues, but we've also produced research and conferencing and reports on Pakistan's broader challenges, from water and energy shortages and food insecurity to demographic growth and urbanization and institutional challenges and many things in between. So this conference marks our latest effort to give Pakistan the full and broad-based attention that it deserves. The Pakistan Policy Symposium is an effort to step back from all the noise and the frequently emotional arguments that often dominate discussion on Pakistan in Washington, particularly these days, and instead to take stock carefully of Pakistan's future. And I'll be candid, it's not particularly fashionable these days to think deeply and broadly, particularly broadly, about Pakistan, and especially for 2 days straight. But that's exactly what we plan to do because we think it's the right thing to do. I need not explain to this audience why Pakistan is a significant country, strategically speaking, for U.S. interests, and for reasons that go beyond what may be happening across the border in Afghanistan. And there's also the question of why do this conference now? Well, from a policy framework, the timing is fortuitous. Pakistan, as you all know, has a new government that has projected itself as reformist in the most fundamental sense. The new administration, led by the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf Party and Prime Minister Imran Khan, has vowed to do away with business as usual. The PTI projects itself as something different, a clean party not led by a family dynasty, and it insists that it will run the country differently from previous governments as well. Now, of course, it's way too early to judge how this PTI-led government will fare. There are major challenges, for sure, in implementing bold and ambitious reforms in a nation with deeply entrenched, powerful interests that have consistently and successfully obstructed attempts at reforms in previous years. And of course, this new government is not the first new government in Pakistan to vow to undertake major reforms. But still, Islamabad does appear genuinely committed to bringing about change. Given the large consensus in Pakistan, and in Washington for that matter, that policy correctives are needed across the board, such a commitment is far from a bad thing. So it's in this spirit of change and reform that we present this Pakistan Policy Symposium, which is an effort to tease out some practical and actionable policy recommendations for Pakistan in the coming years. We've advised our speakers not to get bogged down in past history, but to be forward-thinking in their comments about what should and should not, and what can and cannot be done in the future. So the overarching question is this: can Pakistan take advantage of its numerous opportunities? And how, if at all, can Pakistan address its challenges, some old, some new, that could jeopardize these opportunities and gains of recent years? For example, terrorist violence has fallen dramatically in Pakistan in recent years. This generates opportunities to capitalize on an improved security situation, and yet, how do you tackle the violent extremism and ideologies of hate that remain entrenched and which could produce new generations of terrorists? Meanwhile, on the economic front, in recent years, Pakistan graduated to the status of emerging market. An increasing middle class, a large and young labor force, the proliferation of promising new industries, such as information technology, these things present opportunities for economic growth. And yet, as is very clear, Pakistan today is in the throes of a fresh economic crisis that really manifests the same problems: plunging foreign reserves, an imbalance of payments, and attributable to the same causes: too many expensive imports, too many uncompetitive exports, an inefficient agricultural sector that have materialized again and again in previous decades. So what can be done to get Pakistan out of this rut? And more broadly, what role can the Pakistani diaspora play in this story? And what can be said about the important contributions of entrepreneurs and of women? Moving into the international realm, can the US and Pakistan find a way to cooperate despite all the baggage and mistrust in the relationship? Can the two sides move beyond the Haqqani network and other tension points that dominate the relationship these days? Can the two sides find a way to cooperate on an endgame in Afghanistan? So these are quite a few weighty questions that I've just thrown out there, and these are just a few of the ones that we'll explore over the next few days. But then again, when you've got 6 panel discussions and 2 addresses on tap, you want to have many questions on the table. So just very briefly, I'd like to recognize a series of people. When you organize a 2-day conference, you need many people to work very hard for many days. So I thank first my Wilson Center Asia program colleagues, Joshua Spooner and Mary Ratliff, for all their help on the logistical side. I thank John Tyler and his multimedia team, along with Howard Watkins, Prince Palmer, and Maria Stella Gatzoulis for all their help on the facilities management and operations sides of things. Now I turn to our valued partner in this grand enterprise, and that is Indus, the Indus organization. In a few minutes, you'll hear from Indus, about Indus, but I'd just like to say that I am tremendously grateful for all the support and good cheer to come from my friends at Indus over the last few months. There's no way, and I mean this literally, no way this conference would have happened without the involvement and support of Indus. And for that, I'm very grateful. Specifically, I thank Dr. Athar Javed, the president of Indus, seated right in the front. I also thank Shahzad Habib, the Indus Special Advisor, who you'll hear from shortly. I thank as well Amber Jamil, who heads the communications and outreach side of Indus, as well as Indus's head of operations, David Silverman, along with Indus member Nasser Naveed. These are all very talented and motivated people who, like the Wilson Center, are keen to think deeply about Pakistan and US-Pakistan relations, even when it may not be easy or fashionable to do so. The Wilson Center and Indus have worked very closely on this conference over the last few months, and I confess I may miss not talking to you all every day once the conference is over. I'm not sure you all will miss me, but I'll miss you. So in just a moment, I'll turn things over to Shahzad, who will speak briefly and transition us into our opening address. But first, just a few key remaining details. Over the next 2 days, all of our programming will be here in this room. Lunch will be served across the hall, and our reception later today will also be across the hall. There will be coffee available outside the atrium throughout the day over the next 2 days. However, please note that food and drink are not permitted in this auditorium. If you're clutching a cup of coffee, it's okay. You're not going to be apprehended, but just be mindful of the rule going forward. The entire conference will be live streamed. We encourage all of you here, but also watching around the world, to engage in some live tweeting using the hashtag PTC Pakistan. You should give it a try. Everyone does it these days. And the Wilson Center password, the wireless password, appears on the walls in this room. So now let me briefly introduce Shahzad Habib. He is a senior advisor to Indus. He's also founder and managing partner of Manhattan Strategy Group. He's overseen that firm's growth, strategic planning, and external relationships. The firm advises the U.S. government on key issues related to education, workforce, and human services. It's a company grounded in the philosophy of social capitalism. And Shahzad has also advised Fortune 500 clients in the areas of energy, healthcare, consumer goods, and financial services, among other things. So, Shahzad, the floor is yours.
Wow, it's good to be here. February 1st, that's the first time the Indus team shared the idea of the Pakistan Policy Symposium with the Wilson Center. While there are many short events focused on Pakistan and narrow topics that take place in Washington, we wanted to think about something that's comprehensive and that could cover the changing state of union both in US and Pakistan, as well as cover some of the key issues that are facing Pakistan right now. This is how we conceived the idea of the Pakistan Policy Symposium. Um, Michael spoke a lot about the policy context and framework, but just to give you a little bit more detail in what to expect over the next 2 days, we are expecting these 2 days to have 6 panels and spotlight speakers baked in for each of the key panels that are quite noteworthy. On day 1, we'd like to cover US-Pakistan relationships. What is a workable model between the US and Pakistan as we move ahead? Pakistan and Afghanistan, obviously there is no conversation about Pakistan and DC these days without Afghanistan lumped into it. So what is a workable model between Kabul, Islamabad, and Washington that makes sense? We'd like to cap off the day today with women's entrepreneurship. Obviously, as a growing country, Pakistan needs to be fully taking advantage of its growing population as well as bring women to the forefront. So that is something that we're very excited about talking later today. We will be ending the day with a lovely reception right here at the Wilson Center, where we have some cultural display of Pakistani music and some refreshments will be served. This will take us into day 2, so just to give you a sense of what to expect tomorrow. We will be starting off discussing the economic future of Pakistan, what is possible in the immediate, short, and long term for Pakistan from an economic perspective. We will then follow this up with a related panel for the diaspora. The current government in Pakistan has really called upon overseas Pakistanis to support and to help them in their current cause. So what can the US Pakistani diaspora do from an entrepreneurship perspective that helps with these issues of remittance, investment, and what kind of culture and what kind of conducive environment is required in Pakistan in order to allow these foreign overseas Pakistanis to play a key role. And lastly, obviously, we want to touch upon issues that are challenging, state, society, and extremism. And while there are some forward steps that Pakistan has taken on the state front, as Michael indicated, there are still issues remaining with extremism that we need to manage, and we will be discussing that in detail. We are very fortunate, as Michael said, to have some of these noteworthy speakers. Folks have traveled here from very far, so very thankful for that. We have folks representing the US government, the Pakistani government, academia, policymakers, think tanks, as well as the business community, so it's a very good cross-section of individuals. And what this symposium also signifies and demonstrates is the fact that the emerging role that the Pakistani-American diaspora can play when it comes to US-Pakistan relationships, or healthier US-Pakistan relationships from a policy entrepreneurship perspective. The diaspora understands the democratic values here in the US, as well as understands the ground realities in Pakistan. This creates a great bridge opportunity between both countries. What do we expect as an outcome coming out of this conference? As we think about the 6 panels and the spotlight speakers, we as a group would like to put together key takeaways, synthesize the ideas that are generated over the next 2 days, and share that with all available parties. So these products that we put together, we will have available for dissemination to all those who are interested, and likely also share with both administrations if that is of interest to them, because this is a lot of intellectual capital that we've gathered, and some of the thoughts may be valuable for parties of interest. A little bit about Indus. Indus is a diaspora-run think tank, and Indus does fill a white space in the market. While there are many Pakistan-focused, initiatives in larger and very esteemed think tanks here in Washington, there is no pure-play diaspora-run think tank, and that is the space that Indus occupies. What is the focus of Indus? It's 3-pronged, if you will. First is policy discussions of relevance to Pakistan. Second is youth development. And these are the areas or topics related to civil liberties, rights of individuals, as well as tolerance. Those are the topics that we would like to cover through peer-to-peer interaction between youth here in the US and Pakistan. And lastly, it's community integration here in homeland USA. That is the kind of core 3 focus areas of Indus. What is the philosophy behind Indus? Indus believes or respects that the best ideas for public reform and change actually take place in the academic world. These are the ideas that are the best ideas for change and reform that are generated at research institutions, think tanks, college campuses. And Indus itself is one such idea that draws upon scholars, thinkers, writers, and journalists that have passion for a politically stable Pakistan. This philosophy was inspired by Mr. Athar Javed, who is the president of Indus, who formed Indus in 2014 as a 501c3. Indus has no political affiliations in the US or in Pakistan. Indus is nonpartisan, self-directed, and an objective entity. As we wrap up, I would like to thank the Wilson Center for being an excellent collaborative partner for us. Without them, this would not be possible. Michael Kugelman, I think, has been a really, really good person to work with and coordinate with. And I was joking with him that I may have withdrawal symptoms after this is done of what I'm going to do in terms of filling my time. I would like to thank the Indus team for working tirelessly to put this event together. It took a lot of effort. I would like to thank the speakers that have traveled from far and beyond to come here today. Their time is very valuable, so the fact that they have shared their time with us is greatly appreciated. And lastly, I'd like to thank the audience. Without you, there is no event. If there's no one to listen to us, who are we going to talk to? The walls, I guess. So very much appreciate your participation and being here today. And I would please hope that you enjoy the next 2 days. So thank you very much. So moving on to our opening remarks or our keynote conversation, it is my great pleasure to introduce our noteworthy key speaker, Mr. Henry Ensher. Mr. Ensher assumed the duty of acting Deputy Assistant Secretary for Pakistan recently, just this month actually, beginning of the month. And prior to that, Mr. Ensher served as the acting Deputy Secretary for Afghanistan. Mr. Ensher has a very noteworthy background, and some of his background experience covers Chief of Mission in Vienna, Ambassador of the United States to Algeria, Director of the Office of Afghanistan Affairs, Political Advisor at Central Command, Chair of Near East and North Africa Studies, as well as Deputy Political Counselor in Baghdad, Iran. So as we can see, Mr. Ensher is very well-versed individual when it comes to South Asia, Central Asia, as well as the Middle East. So we're very thankful to have him. So let's give a quick round of applause to Mr. Ensher to join us.
Shahzad, you want me up there?
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. So good morning. Thank you very much indeed, Shahzad, and to the Wilson Center and to Indus for this opportunity. As Shahzad kindly pointed out, I'm the new guy. So this is a great opportunity for me to learn from the very best, and frankly, in a room that includes Ambassador Schaefer, Ambassador Rafel, and David Sedney, it's a little embarrassing actually to be talking to them rather than listening to them. So I'll hope to hear from theirs and others' wisdom as we go through the course of the day. Today I'll discuss, with your kind permission, Pakistan's opportunities to be a stronger regional player, to the new civilian government's challenges and opportunities as we see them, and the United States partnership with Pakistan in addressing changes and challenges. I have to start by acknowledging that the U.S.-Pakistan relationship is a long one. It was born, in fact, the same year as Pakistan in 1947. We have long valued and continue to do so our relationship with Pakistan and recognize that both countries benefit through cooperation on a range of issues from business interests to counterterrorism to education. With a growing population of over 200 million in a strategically important neighborhood, our relationship with Pakistan will remain important. However, over a year after the introduction of the U.S. South Asia strategy, we have once again, as we are wont to do between Pakistan and the United States, we've arrived at a crossroads. To understand why, we need to return, I think, to the President's strategy for South Asia, which he announced in August of 2017. In his speech, after a comprehensive review by the U.S. national security community, the President reiterated that we must address the continued existence of safe havens that enable terrorists to carry out attacks that threaten regional and global security, and we must prevent nuclear weapons and materials from coming into the hands of terrorists and being used against us or anywhere in the world. To be clear, those are our two highest priorities in Pakistan and through the region, along with achieving reconciliation in Afghanistan. A fundamental pillar of our new strategy was a shift from a time-based approach in Afghanistan to one based on conditions. Conditions on the ground rather than timetables guide our strategy in Afghanistan. Another fundamental pillar of the strategy is reaffirming the use of all instruments of American power, diplomatic, economic, and military, to reach peace and stability in Afghanistan and the region. That includes doing everything we can to reach a political settlement in Afghanistan. We say this recognizing that it is ultimately up to the people of Afghanistan its government and its military to take ownership of their future and govern their society and to achieve lasting peace. Take a moment to note a real opportunity for Pakistan here is Afghan elections are in a couple of days on October 20th. We would expect that Pakistan would want to use all of its influence to ensure that Afghans can vote in security and help them achieve a representative government. So we would hope for a peaceful election day with a view to increasing stability in Afghanistan and the region. As part of the South Asia strategy, we invigorated our approach to regional diplomacy in engaging all players from Afghanistan and Pakistan and India to China, Central Asia, and even Russia, including the focus on getting the Taliban to the negotiating table for a peace settlement in Afghanistan. Even as we have broadened our regional diplomacy, there remains a special role for Pakistan with regard to the South Asia strategy in regional security, economic integration, and notably the reconciliation process. Indeed, we have sharpened our approach to Pakistan with an eye to improving mutually favorable outcomes. As the president specifically put it, over the decades, Pakistan has been a valued partner. Our militaries have worked together against common enemies. The Pakistani people have suffered greatly from terrorism and extremism, and we respect their sacrifices. Pakistan has also shown it can address terrorism on its territory when it is determined to do so, as it has done in recent years with domestically focused groups such as the Pakistani Taliban. Its markedly improved domestic security is a reflection of that determination. At the same time, as the president said, we can no longer be silent about the fact that some externally focused terrorist groups enjoy safe haven in Pakistan's territory. Groups like the Taliban, the Haqqani Network, and others stage attacks from Pakistan that target U.S. and coalition forces, as well as Afghan civilians and security forces, in addition to the nationals of Pakistan's neighbors, thereby threatening regional and global stability. Pakistan, we believe, has much to gain from partnering with our peace effort in Afghanistan and much to lose by providing safe haven to terrorists who pose a threat to peace and stability in Afghanistan. No partnership can survive such a disconnect, and the president has said it is time for Afghanistan to demonstrate it will be a constructive partner for peace in the region, taking decisive action against terrorist groups on its territory and doing all it can to lay the groundwork for peace and peace negotiations. In the rollout of the South Asia strategy, we also expressed our concern about Pakistan's development of long and short-range missile launch capabilities and its growing nuclear stockpile. Specifically, we've expressed concern about the increased security challenges that accompany growing stockpiles, particularly battlefield nuclear weapons, as they pose a greater risk from theft and misuse. These weapons also increase the risk that a conventional conflict between India and Pakistan could escalate to use of nuclear weapons. And so, a little over a year later, where are we today? It's a mixed picture. In line with the vision of the South Asia strategy, there is arguably progress in Afghanistan. Despite security concerns and great violence, prospects for peace with the Taliban have advanced, even if terrorists such as ISIS-K remain a resilient, evolving, and potent threat. Regional support for the Afghan government and political process is as important now as it ever has been. On Pakistan, the reality is that we have seen some action from Pakistan. We have not seen the decisive steps from Pakistan that would demonstrate commitment to ensuring their territory cannot be used by the Taliban, the Haqqani Network, and other groups that would sow violence and instability in the region. Our suspension of security assistance and coalition support fund payments to Pakistan in January of 2018 reflect our concern over Pakistan's continued counterproductive policies. We see new opportunities for Pakistan and in our bilateral relationship. A new civilian government is in place. Pakistan's national election has brought to power a leader who has long focused on the conflict in Afghanistan. The Prime Minister has a personal perspective on the prolonged conflict, and the PTI government has had firsthand experience in governing Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province on the border with Afghanistan since 2013. Prime Minister Khan has said himself that peace in Pakistan depends on peace in Afghanistan. The new government has the opportunity to be our partner in bringing peace and stability to Afghanistan and prosperity and security to Pakistan. Doing so would enable a more mutually beneficial relationship. We've been encouraged by the several recent conversations between senior leaders of the two governments, Secretary Pompeo, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Chairman Dunford, have met with Prime Minister Khan, Foreign Minister Qureshi, and Chief of Army Staff Bajwa in Islamabad within the last month, and Foreign Minister Qureshi was in Washington just this month. Meanwhile, the United States has appointed Ambassador Zalmay Khalilzad, a distinguished and familiar face, as Special Representative for Afghanistan Reconciliation. In so doing, the United States has signaled our commitment and the importance of Afghan reconciliation as a component of the South Asia strategy and our vision for the region. Special Representative Khalilzad was in the region, including Islamabad, just last week. The meetings I've described were indeed positive in tone, and throughout, Prime Minister Khan and his team acknowledged that these meetings represent another opportunity for Pakistan. Opportunities, however, cannot be merely discussed, they must be seized and action taken. On those happy occasions when I talk to Pakistanis, there are two criticisms of U.S. policy I hear frequently. The first is that our bilateral relationship is too Afghanistan-centric. The second is disagreement with our use of pressure to try to induce a shift from Pakistan. On the first point, the reality is that we've been engaged in conflict for Afghanistan for 17 years. We have more than 15,000 troops on the ground. We've spent, the figure here says $900 billion. It could be considerably more than that. In any case, it's a lot of money. And our country has endured 2,271 deaths among our military and has taken 20,000 casualties. In an important relationship with many common interests, efforts to bring stability to Afghanistan is our primary and major area of policy divergence with Pakistan at this moment. As long as that continues, it will continue to color and take center stage in the bilateral relationship. On the second point, there is truth to the idea that we are applying pressure to Pakistan, and it's an important component of our policy. As we've seen, this administration is willing to use pressure to advance U.S. national interests. We will continue to do so in South Asia as well as elsewhere. But that should not disguise the fact that we genuinely believe that a shift in Pakistani policy, in line with our strategy, the South Asia strategy, is very much in Pakistan's own interest as well. The future course of our relationship, and indeed the trajectory of Pakistan's development, rests in the hands of Pakistan's leaders. First and foremost, we've argued to Pakistan that the status quo in Afghanistan does not serve Pakistan's interests. The ISIS threat to Afghanistan, Pakistan, and the region remains. Further, the greater the instability in Afghanistan, the more the Pakistani Taliban, or TTP, can use Afghanistan's territory as a platform for attacks in Pakistan. One thing that we've noticed over the course of the last several years since 9/11 is that lack of governance, bad governance, a vacuum in governance in large swaths of territory is invariably bad for us. And so that's why we are as concerned as we are about ISIS-K and continuing instability in Afghanistan in particular. Pakistan has been a generous host to over 1.4 million refugees from Afghanistan, many for decades. Doing so has been a substantial burden, both economically and politically. Instability in Afghanistan also prevents refugees in Pakistan from returning home in a safe and dignified manner. Pakistan has expressed support in public and private for a goal of ending the conflict in Afghanistan through a negotiated settlement. To realize this shared objective, we need a peace process that creates a political dialogue. With the appointment of our new special representative and with recent developments, we are perhaps closer to real negotiations than we have been some time. Certainly that's my personal impression since I've been working in the Bureau. It was really quite clear in previous incarnations that we were managing the war. There is now an opportunity to end it, and so I hope that we all take advantage of that and do what we can to bring it about. We know that Pakistan cannot deliver a deal by itself, but Pakistan can assist in this area. It can play a constructive role. We appreciate that Pakistan has publicly called on the Taliban to seize the opportunity for peace in Afghanistan and welcome additional measures the Pakistani government could take to increase the willingness of the Taliban leadership to negotiate. Turning to the new civilian government and its opportunities in strengthening Pakistan, both domestically and as a regional player. The reality is that long-standing proxy policies and unresolved regional tensions have had steep costs for Pakistan in a range of different and sometimes overlooked ways. Pakistan has the potential to be a leader in the region economically and politically. It sits at the crossroads of many large and growing economies. It has a large entrepreneurial and capable population and is building infrastructure linking to the broader region. But to date, its policies have instead fed instability and division in the region and in Pakistan as well. I mentioned a couple of examples. The tolerance of some terrorist groups on its territory have enabled radicalization domestically in key areas, particularly among vulnerable populations. We encourage bilateral discussions between India and Pakistan to reduce tensions and lead to improved relations. But the presence of terrorists and militants on Pakistan soil will limit the potential for and the likely outcomes of any such dialogue. We encourage Pakistan to address these issues. Regional tensions have long stymied regional trade, the one thing most likely to be economically transformative. South and Central Asia remains the least economically integrated in the region. Afghanistan-Pakistan trade has plummeted in recent years due to bilateral tensions and difficulties at the border. The World Bank estimates potential trade between India and Pakistan alone to be properly worth about $37 billion from its current level of $2 billion. So there's a $35 billion delta between potential and reality. A transformed orientation toward its neighbors could reshape Pakistan's economy and that of the region. These conflicts have had an impact on Pakistan in more than one insidious way. Over the years in Pakistan, the resources required for war have meant fewer resources for the social sector, educational opportunities, and healthcare. Pakistan ranks lower than all countries for domestic healthcare in the South Asia region except for Afghanistan. 58% of the population is illiterate, compared to 27% in Bangladesh. 46% of women above age 15 cannot read or write. Pakistan has the worst mortality rate in the world, with 1 in 22 newborns at risk of dying. 45% of children under age 5 are physically and mentally stunted, compared to 38% in India, and only 22% of the population has access to the internet. Unfortunately, from our vantage point, Pakistan has recently moved backwards in some of the areas that inflame regional tensions and create problems. For example, Hafiz Saeed, who is a UN Security Council designated terrorist, was released from house arrest last November and regularly speaks at public gatherings with impunity on at least one occasion in company with a minister of the new government. In January, Pakistan pledged to take actions to crack down on UN-designated affiliates of Lashkar-e-Taiba, specifically Jamaat-e-Dawa and Falah Insaniyat Foundation. 10 months later, there is no evidence the government has taken over JUD and FIF operations as it promised, or taken other measures to prevent those groups from operating. When the international community agreed to put Pakistan on the Financial Action Task Force gray list in June, Pakistan made a high-level political commitment to work with the FATF to end counterterrorism financing, including cracking down on groups such as JUD and FIF. We expect Pakistan will uphold its commitments under the Financial Action Task Force action plan it endorsed. Some saw the FATF, as we call it, gray listing, as punitive. It's not really that way. We expect that it is in fact an opportunity. Pakistan's growth, which has been roughly 5% in recent years, has been solid, but Pakistan has nonetheless had trouble attracting foreign investment. Many people say that Pakistan has a perception problem The reality is that the easiest way for Pakistan to improve its climate as a target for foreign direct investment, it would be to demonstrate that Pakistan is a country that contributes to peace in the region and does not allow its territory or its financial systems to be used by terrorist groups to undermine security in the region. Pakistan's economy, too, represents both a challenge and an opportunity for the new government. Even as Pakistan grapples with a balance of payments crisis and has approached the International Monetary Fund for assistance, the new civilian government has a chance to adopt much-needed structural reforms and constructively transform the economy for the better. Many of the fundamentals are there. Pakistan has a sizable English-speaking population with an entrepreneurial spirit, the majority of whom are under 30 years old, has a strong IT base, good growth, and a fast-growing middle class. One of the indications of the potentials for Pakistan is the great success of Pakistanis when they travel overseas. I have to say, as an American, I'm always somewhat ambivalent about this phenomenon when I see it. We're happy to have the best and brightest come to America and succeed here. As a foreign policy professional, having people stay at home and do great work there is also a benefit. It's hard to know what's better at any given moment, but it is an indicator that Pakistanis can succeed anywhere if they're given enough space. Also want to take note here, if I may, of the session that Shahzad referred to at the end, the one on women and entrepreneurship. As an operator, foreign policy operator, it's just been a simple observation of mine that programs, policies, any sort of effort goes much better when women are involved. It's always nice to have one's observations confirmed, and over the weekend I heard, in fact, that there's science to indicate that peace happens faster and is more durable when women are involved from the beginning. So there's a real argument there, I think, to be made. So many foreign companies, including U.S. companies, are committed to investing in Pakistan. Their work is paid off with strong growth and profits. These companies view Pakistan as a promising market with great business and investment potential. Many large corporations have permanent offices in Pakistan, including 65 members of the American Business Council in Pakistan, which directly or indirectly employ close to 1 million Pakistanis. However, the real impediments to trade and investment are also considerable, and we hear this regularly from U.S. businesses. For instance, U.S.-Pakistan trade ties reached $6.4 billion last year, a record high, but it could be much higher. Pakistan is ranked 147th out of 190 countries by the World Bank Ease of Doing Business Index. Corruption, red tape, and unpredictable taxation policies are in large part responsible for this underperformance. These mundane day-to-day impediments to doing business deter international businesses from considering Pakistan. Pakistan's new civilian government has both the challenge and the opportunity to implement concrete structural reforms that will improve the business climate and foster long-term economic stability. The new civilian government specifically can take advantage of some opportunities that I would mention here. One would be they can foster trade and investment relations with neighbors, as we've discussed, including by facilitating trade across the border with Afghanistan and with India. Could modernize tax collection methods and expand the tax base, that is to say, get people to pay their taxes. Addressing circular debt and developing a culture of end-use payment. In other words, people should pay for services that they get. Creating an integrated system of long-term energy planning, providing regulatory and tariff relief and improving infrastructure for export industries, upholding international standards in infrastructure development, reforming and privatizing failing state-owned companies, implementing a classic government regulatory role, and allowing free competition in markets. That means governments getting out of the markets and regulating activities within the markets instead of participating in them. Fairly pricing water, improving irrigation methods, and cooperating on trans-boundary water issues, And finally, investing in human capacity to prevent further brain drain out of Pakistan. Of course, Pakistan is going to do what it wants. And then Pakistan will reap or forego the rewards that I've just mentioned. But across these areas and across all these sectors, and despite our differences in the past and continuing, if Pakistan makes smart choices, the U.S. is prepared to be its partner. We're prepared to work closely with Pakistan on peace negotiations for a better future in Afghanistan and to partner closely on counterterrorism efforts. We've been the largest donor as Pakistan reconstructs its communities impacted by successful counterterrorism operations against the TTP and other terrorist organizations. Pakistan is to be commended for adopting a landmark constitutional amendment that will transform the federally administered tribal areas are governed. We are prepared to work with Pakistan to make further progress. We don't always get credit for it, but U.S. assistance has helped Pakistan, for example, add over 3,200 megawatts to its power supply, which I'm told is enough to power the cities of Karachi, Lahore, Peshawar, and Islamabad. U.S. companies are already profitably involved in this sector and would do more. Similarly, if Pakistan takes steps to implement its terror financing regime and make it easier for businesses to operate, the United States will help Pakistan pitch itself to U.S. companies, which we would see as a win-win for both countries. Lastly, education. I think this is some of the education dollars are some of the best forms of assistance that we provide to other countries. Pakistan is no exception, and I think this is an area of potential growth and already great success. Both countries, for example, finance the largest U.S.-funded Fulbright program in the world. Pakistan is the largest contributor to the Fulbright program of any developing country. We have over 20 Pakistani-U.S. university partnerships in such areas as agriculture, business, and religious studies. There are 25,000 Pakistani alumni of U.S. exchanges and other programs. With these efforts, we can continue to build a brighter future for both our countries and our people. Thank you indeed very much.
Thank you for your remarks, Mr. Ensher. Really, I think that was a very comprehensive set of remarks that you provided us. It gave us a sense of some of the positive aspects of the relationship, some of the historical relevance, if you will, as well as some areas of improvement or that areas that need to be addressed as Pakistan looks towards the future. So I think, and you covered many angles of security, economy, local, regional, bilateral trade. So quite a bit in that conversation that we just heard from you. So in the interest of time and making sure that we move forward with the agenda, the next part of the session over here will be I will maybe help set a little bit of a frame with Mr. Ensher to set the stage of the conference, and then maybe open up for Q&A for the audience to ask any questions for Mr. Ensher. So if that works. Mr. Ensher, what we'd like to do is, given the theme of the conference, we are focused on economy, security, and society. So maybe I can set up a few questions that can, anchor the dialogue, kind of following your remarks over here, and then open it up to the public to see if they have any questions. So starting off, and to hear your comments of that, one of the things that, the new government is speaking about in Pakistan is this, and it's interesting, this actually came up at our breakfast this morning when I was sitting with the speakers, is this Scandinavian-style welfare state that the Imran Khan government is looking to put in place. And, given where the country is currently from a historical standpoint, the regimes that it's had and where it wants to be, any thoughts or comments you have on, what that means for you or for the U.S.?
Well, you've indicated that I like the phrase Scandinavian socialism. You've set it up nicely here. Needless to say, we think that free markets are the way to go in Pakistan and elsewhere. We've indicated that there's lots of different ways in which Pakistan could make the changes necessary for the private sector to play a proper role. We think it is important for the government to move toward a regulatory role and to stop having quite so many of its own entities participating in the market, acting in the market. Look, inevitably, when the government is a major part of the economy, there are dislocations, the normal economic relationships are skewed, and so our forms of cooperation will always, I think, aim at improving the prospects for the private sector, which is the real engine of growth, we think, in Pakistan.
Well, thank you for that. Moving a little bit into some of the other themes and picking up from your conversation over here, and something to bring up, Pakistan, when people think about Pakistan, they think about CPEC, obviously comes top of mind. However, the question that I'm asking is a little bit different. Does the US see any economic opportunities for itself when it comes to CPEC, and specifically for American companies or the private sector? Is there something of an opportunity available there?
Well, look, first of all, when it comes to CPEC, more infrastructure, greater connectivity throughout the region and in Pakistan is a great thing. There's no doubt about that. Issues that we've had with CPEC and BRAs flow from, there's a certain lack of transparency about the terms of those contracts, of the associated contracts, and the consequent effects on the economy. It'll be interesting now to see, with Pakistan turning toward the IMF and the IMF's request for, I think Dr. Lagarde said, absolute transparency is required as Pakistan deals with the IMF. So we'll see now whether these contracts, whether the debt that is being accumulated under the contracts really makes sense for Pakistan. And will enable or not the IMF to move toward an arrangement with Pakistan.
Thank you for that. You also touched upon security assistance for Pakistan, and obviously currently, security assistance is somewhat suspended. However, we wanted to understand, if there are any priorities for non-security assistance in Pakistan. And, one area that comes to mind, Pakistan is grappling with this water challenge right now. And we know historically U.S. has been a good ally. There's a university set up, Mehran University and University of Utah had a joint program. There is, I think, $66 million of funding that is available right now for a project in Pakistan related to water sanitization. So any thoughts for where this is headed from a non-security perspective and assistance?
Well, the civilian assistance, civilian cooperation continue. Obviously, in the budgetary process and policy review process, there's always room for change and differences of focus and quantity of assistance, quantity of resources. Thank you for mentioning water again. I'm from the Central Valley of California, which we know about the importance of water and its proper management, even as a source of political stability or not. So that would be an area of focus. And again, I have to take the opportunity to emphasize the great importance that we attach to education. It's just really hard to think of an area of cooperation that pays greater dividends for both countries.
Thank you for that. Also touching upon Afghanistan, I think you spoke about, Pakistan's role with Afghanistan and what that looks like, and maybe to give folks a little bit of context, if we take a look at historically, there were primarily two external actors when it came to Afghanistan. There was the US and Pakistan. However, there are a number of regional actors that are gaining influence in that region. We see Iran, Russia, and China, all US strategic rivals, eyeing that particular space. How does this expanded regional engagement affect US objectives and policy in Afghanistan?
I think our approach and our objectives in Afghanistan are really pretty simple. We want security, political, and economic stability there. That's good for us. The opposite, instability, a lack of governance, a vacuum of governance, that's invariably bad for us. The core of our policy objectives in Afghanistan, as the president said last year, is to prevent that territory from being used against us again. It's really quite simple. It's very hard to believe that any country, including all of Afghanistan's neighbors, would have an interest in instability, would not want to see the country governed properly. So there ought to be areas of confluence of interests, if not if not cooperation.
Okay. I know before we go to questions, I just had a couple, one or two, one questions that we've also receiving in text. Let me address one, and then we'll open it up to the audience over here. One of the comments that I received was that, recently Pakistan has made some comments that, when it comes to the South Asia strategy as well as its relationship with Afghanistan, they're looking for more of a shared responsibility with the US, and they don't want to be at blame for everything, if you will, or for all failures. So based on one of those questions, just wanted to see your comment or
Sure.
thought.
I don't get the sense at all that we or others are blaming Pakistan for what's gone on in Afghanistan for the last 17 years. Quite right that there are regional responsibilities. Other countries, including those in Central Asia, have stepped up a little bit and have begun to seek to help international efforts seek a negotiated settlement in Afghanistan. But we believe that it is a matter of fact that there are these safe havens, there are these sanctuaries, and those have to be dealt with. What's going on in Afghanistan is fueled, at least in part, by Pakistan's policies and choices, and it's in that area where we think Pakistan needs to make some changes, even as it plays a role in moving toward a negotiated settlement.
Well, thank you for that. With the interest of time, we'll open it up to the audience. I think the lady over here first, if she has a question, someone can please bring her the mic. And if you could keep your questions brief to give others a chance as well, that would be much appreciated.
Thank you. I'm Tazy Schaefer, longtime Foreign Service, now with McLarty Associates. I wanted to pick up a couple of things that Henry Enschert mentioned in his talk. First was the observation that Pakistanis criticized U.S.-Pakistan relations for being too Afghan-centric. You made a good argument, but I actually agree with the observation and would suggest that your subsequent discussion of economics, and especially tomorrow's discussion of economics, are part of the answer. I think we should be consciously looking, as Americans, for areas of the U.S.-Pakistan relationship that are important in their own right and that don't have anything to do with Afghanistan. You mentioned leadership in the region. I see that more as seizing opportunities, because leadership implies followership, and that sounds like another way of recasting the India-Pakistan dispute. And I think there's a reason that the conference chose not to devote time to that. It's always going to be there. It's always going to be a problem. Finally, I would like to underline the importance you attach to social development in Pakistan. These are tremendously important issues in which Pakistan has actually plenty of talent to address them, but they are very hard.
Thank you. Yes, please. Gentleman over here.
Oh, we're going to go around? Okay,
Yes.
good.
If that's okay, I guess.
Yep.
Henry, I'm Will Embry from
Hey, Will.
DynCorp International.
Hey, man.
Could you talk a little bit about Pakistan and China, the military assistance, the quantity and quality of it, economic assistance, financial assistance, and perhaps the impact on Pakistan's indebtedness?
You mean from China?
All of it.
Ours.
Yeah, worldwide, but China being a piece of that.
Oh, okay.
Thank you very much. I'm an Afghan-American journalist. I would like your comments, please, about the role that other partners can play in devising a better solution that would lead to peace in Afghanistan. What kind of leverage can the U.S. encourage China, Russia, Iran to practice in bringing a real peace to the region? And also, I am amazed at how often I have to explain to ordinary Americans what is the reason why the United States is still engaged in Afghanistan. As an Afghan, I understand it quite well. I think it would be useful to refresh a very succinct definition of why it is that the U.S. feels Afghanistan cannot become a vacuum again. Thank you.
If I could moderate the questions, that would be appreciated. Yeah.
My name is Arifa Khalid. I have been former member of the Parliament of Pakistan for 10 years. And I have a question, as you mentioned here, that US can play a good role in Pakistan and Afghanistan's stable role, as Pakistan can't do it alone, as you just mentioned. So can you please elaborate it a little bit more? And how do you see CPAC from US point of view, as you are the biggest trade partners of Pakistan? So how do you see, and what is your role in Pakistan in CPAC? Thank you.
Is that comment for question for Mr. Ansher, or is that a comment or a question?
No, that's a question. I wanted to ask you that how do you see that what role US can have in our progress of, in CPAC and the connection and the Silk routes
Got it.
with America?
Yes, ma'am.
I think we addressed some of that in detail in the opening remarks, as well as the question asked earlier. But I think from just to
I'm happy to. Do you want me to go through a few of these right now? I can seldom keep more than one or two things in my mind at a time. So.
maybe we take a few questions together. I think that would be good. So what the gentleman over here and the gentleman over here, if you could ask some questions, and maybe we can address them in a group fashion.
Actually, I meant, could I answer a couple of them now, and then you
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Good, thank you.
I was thinking the reverse.
That was a test, and I was not going to pass. Okay. All right. First of all, ma'am, Ambassador Schaefer, we'd really like nothing better than to sort of move on from the war. Of course, the relationship with Pakistan is decentered, skewed, if you want, because of the situation in Afghanistan. But as soon as you say 15,000 troops, over 2,000 deaths, $1 trillion, $900 billion, whatever the figure is, that's just inevitable. And so I think that coming to a resolution or a situation in Afghanistan that we can live with is the key to unlocking the potential with Pakistan, which obviously is a really significant country. I mean, it's got close to 7 or 8 times the population. Obviously it ought to be much more important on its own than it is. Should not be something that we think about only in terms of Afghanistan. But that's why it's important for Pakistan to help where they can to reach the political settlement that's necessary for us in Afghanistan. So what I said was analytical, it wasn't prescriptive, but because you're right, as always. On the question of Pakistan, China, CPAC, which I guess are closely related. Again, the infrastructure development, great idea. Better connectivity with other countries in the region, including all the way up into Central Asia, is clearly the way of the future. So we think that China and other countries have a really significant role to play, but that role ought to be done, ought to be played in accordance with usual rules about transparency and accountability, so that people in countries that cooperate with China can see clearly what they're signing up for, right? And again, we're quite happy that the IMF continues to insist on transparency, so that we and other participants in the IMF can see where our money is going. That's also really important to us. Other countries in the region, their role. It's very hard for me to imagine that people want a vacuum of governance, a vacuum of security in Afghanistan. That can only lead to bad things. Countries in Central Asia, for example, confront the issues of the presence of ISIS-K, as we call it, Daesh, as they will sometimes say, right across their border. I mean, already, in fact, we've seen at least one terrorist attack in Tajikistan, which killed 2 Americans. Say that again. Within the last couple of months, ISIS-K, or ISIS, has killed 2 Americans in Tajikistan. I think that's gotten relatively little attention. Quite surprising. So that amplifies or explains, what the threat is. And so attempts by some countries to hedge their bets, so to speak, by working with the Taliban, we think undercut the prospects of the kind of political settlement that makes sense. We are in close dialogue, I would say, with a lot of countries, including Central Asia and elsewhere. Have to come back to Pakistan, though. It is our view, after all, that the Taliban are present in Pakistan, and therefore Pakistan has a significant role in reaching a resolution. I was struck by your comment that you have to explain to your fellow Americans, to our fellow Americans, what are we still doing there? Right. If you're in this business, then there's a clear reason for that, and that is, as I said, we cannot afford once again, to allow Afghanistan to fall into chaos, because chaos breeds terrorist groups. Terrorist groups invariably turn to us eventually, do they not? And in fact, as I just mentioned, they already have. So that's the reason why. Hard to explain in the absence of a terrorist spectacular, but keep on it. It's important.
Thank you, Mr. Ensher. Unfortunately, I've been signaled that we've run out of time, and I would like to apologize for the few hands that went up. We won't be able to accommodate you at this very time in the interest of keeping on schedule. So very much appreciate your comments thus far, and sorry for the ones who couldn't get them in. But most importantly, thank you, Mr. Ensher, for your detailed remarks and your time here today with us. So thank you very much.